But thanks for being here. So you are running for Walton County Board of Commissioners District 3, yes?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and Mr. Stewart, can you just, for people who may not know you, can you just go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, talk about your background?
Okay, I'm Teddy Stewart. I live in District 3, live in Mossy Head community. I was born and raised here in Mossy Head. After high school, joined the Air Force, so I left the area. Ended up just spending 4 years in the Air Force and then retired from the police department in San Antonio after serving there for 22 years. I've been back home in Mossy Head for 10 years now. My family has been here for 4 or 5 generations. It's always been home. While serving the citizens of San Antonio with the police department, was lucky enough to be elected by the 2,000 policemen in San Antonio to represent them for 10 years on the board of our pension fund. Was able to be a part of growing that pension fund from $750 million to over $2 billion in assets. Chaired the legislative committee for 8 years and developed 4 different legislative packages. All of our benefits and contributions, everything were controlled by state law. So I had a lot of experience in developing those long-term planning type benefits for our members to secure their retirement. Also was elected by those officers to represent them for 4 years as the president of the Police Association. As president of the association, had the opportunity to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement. That contract was worth roughly $30 million over 3 years. As I served 2 terms there, and that was enough. It was time to move on. Retired. The police department took a position marketing for an investment company out of New York, and moved back home. I've been back here for 10 years. I've got a real estate license, selling real estate, and enjoying life. Personally, Darlene and I, my wife and I, have been married for 36 years. We have 3 daughters, all of them, successful in their own endeavors and productive members of society, and 7 grandchildren that we enjoy spoiling every chance we get.
Wow, big family.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We've finally got 3 of our grandkids living locally now. Both of the daughters that have the children are both married to military guys, so they've traveled and gone. And we've had our youngest daughter and her 3 kids have been back here in the area since March, and it's been expensive for us. But that's what life's for, so we enjoy them.
Okay, so what would be your top 3 to 5 priorities if you were elected for either the district or the county?
Personally, for the north end of Walton County and the district, District 3 in the north side of the county, my biggest priority is economic development. I think we have some tremendous opportunities targeting manufacturing type businesses to come here. We have about 75 acres left in the Mossy Head Industrial Park, and then the county just purchased 300 acres off of 331 south of I-10. I've talked to several people who have been involved in economic development as far as attracting businesses to different areas. I think that if we target manufacturing, specifically manufacturing for either the automotive industry or the aircraft industry, we have those manufacturers within a radius of Walton County to where we could actually deliver those parts pretty easily. And they don't keep parts, they don't keep an inventory. Basically everything that they use is delivered every day. We're close enough, we have the interstate and things available to us to where we could be a very good fit for some of those types of businesses. That's probably my biggest priority. Second would be infrastructure, in that if you go to the south end of the county, it's almost impossible to get around. 30A has become a parking lot, and we have to figure out ways to start moving people. A lot of ideas have been floated over the years. I personally believe we need to explore looking at parking garages and running a tram from the parking garages to the beach or to the restaurants, and make that, if you make it convenient and you make it easy and people can depend on it being there every 30 minutes or however, however often you're going to do it, I think they'd use it. So the mobility, and the county's worked on a mobility plan for a long time now. Got something, in place that they're looking at. I think we need to start moving on that stuff and stop just looking, stop kicking it down the road and actually start making progress on solving the problems that are created by being the 5th fastest growing county in the country. When you grow that fast, there's going to be infrastructure issues, and we have to start focusing on those. I think that as a county, we do really well as far as serving our citizens, taking care of needs. The biggest complaints that I hear relate to the planning and development process, and it takes too long to be able to get something done. I think we need to ensure that the employees we have working in those areas have the latest technology and training available to them, where they can work as efficient as possible and move these things through. You hear a lot of complaints about development in Walton County, and that's a tough one. I mean, if somebody owns a piece of property and they have rights with that property, they have the right to do what the code allows them to do. I think we have to be cautious in granting variances. Variances are a part of the code, so you can give a variance that still meets the code. It's just the process that you go through to get there, and making sure it benefits the community as a whole, not just an individual developer. That's kind of my priority list. There's lots of things going on. I look forward to working on all of them, but if I had to prioritize things, like I said, economic development is personally my biggest issue for North Walton County.
So I know that Walton County is kind of known for being a sportsman's paradise, basically. The environment there is beautiful,
Right.
lots of trees. How do you plan to balance economic development with environmental preservation?
I think environmental preservation is critical. If you look at, for example, the coastal dune lakes, there's a big development being pushed right now on Draper Lake. I haven't obviously seen everything. I've seen the plans that have been presented to the county. I don't believe that there's any way that development could ever be approved. That's not the type of development we need. You talk about coastal dune lakes, I think we're one of 3 places in the world that have those. We have to do everything we can to protect them. And building townhouses with the type of density they're talking about is certainly not going to do anything to benefit our coastal dune lakes. The bay is a tremendous resource that we have for fishing, for oysters. I mean, we need to do all we can to protect it. I know a lot of progress has been made replacing septic tanks and putting them on sewer systems. That's important to continue. The bay is fragile, but I think that as long as we keep focused on it and understand, if we take an action somewhere in South Walton, it's going to have an impact on our bay and our natural resources. We have to keep that in mind to make sure that we don't do anything that's going to jeopardize those things.
So is that sort of what you mean when you say being a little bit more cautious about who you grant building
Variances?
Yeah, variances.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you own a piece of property, you have rights to go with that property. The code says you can build X. Well, you should be allowed to build X. I mean, if you don't do that, if you start denying those things, you're going to end up in court spending a tremendous amount of money fighting lawsuits, and you're going to lose. Variances are different in that the code allows them, and in some cases, variances are good. It allows a project to be developed that is more beneficial to a community. And when I say you have to balance that, you have to look carefully at what those variances are and the impact that they're going to have, not just on the development, but on what surrounds that development and how it's going to impact the community overall.
Okay, so with the economic development of bringing in more manufacturers, you don't think that would have a negative impact on the land and the environment in Walton County?
Not where those places, not where like in Mossy Head at the industrial park. That's what it's there for. The land that the county purchased off of 331, it was purchased for that purpose. And all of those things can be built with protections in place. If there is something that could be hazardous, you address it on the front end. You make sure that it's taken care of before, as the project's being developed and as it's being built, to protect anything that surrounds it. Those I would never support a manufacturing plant. So in South Walton, one, there's not enough room for it, and two, the ecology down there is much more sensitive. It'd be much harder to protect things that we have in South Walton if you start doing that type of development.
Okay, so if we were to get those manufacturers into Walton County, that would create more jobs and presumably bring more people into Walton County. And so how would you plan to account for that population growth? Half the roads fill that.
As far as housing?
Housing, infrastructure, all those things.
Well, I think, there's a lot of area in North Walton County to build homes. I mean, there's no shortage of open space and no shortage of developable land. I think that building a manufacturing plant and understanding the number of people that are going to be employed and the type of skills those people are going to need. We have a technical college here in Defuniax that can train for anything they need to. And developers, when they see, if a developer hears that X company is coming to 331 south of I-10 to build a plant, they're going to employ 200 people. And those 200 employees are going to be making an average of $50,000 a year. There's a lot of builders and developers around that are going to start building houses to accommodate those people. I think we have to be careful that when we start building new neighborhoods and subdivisions, that the developers that are building those neighborhoods and subdivisions are providing the infrastructure in place that's needed. The county don't need to be buying roads and paving roads in a neighborhood. That's a developer's job. It's also incumbent upon the county to ensure that there's sufficient access to wherever that neighborhood's being built. And the developer being a big contributor to making that possible. In other words, building those streets to get there. If a developer wants to build a 100-house neighborhood, it's up to that developer to make sure that those houses have access and people can get to them. It's not the county's responsibility to do that.
Okay, and is there any worry that people who moved to Walton County moved there because they like just all of the open space and the fact that there is no manufacturer? Is that at all? Is there any?
You always, I don't care what you mean, growth is going to happen. Growth has to happen. That's how you progress. I think as long as that growth is planned carefully and you understand it, then it's okay. Sure, there's going to be someone who lives somewhere that might be down the road from a new neighborhood that, when I bought this property, 20 years ago, everything out here was 100-acre parcels. So I knew no one was going to be within 100 acres of me. Well, progress happens. And as long as you follow the code and allowing the development that's allowed in the area, you're protecting people. But you can't just say, yeah, we want a manufacturing plant to provide 200 jobs, but we're not going to give them a place to live. We're not going to let you build 200 houses. That doesn't make sense. Walton County is a big county, and there's a tremendous amount of open space and a tremendous amount of, ability to grow the county without being detrimental.
Okay, so I guess to change the subject quite abruptly, what are your thoughts on the Confederate monument and flag that sit in Defuniax Springs? I know that there was a vote on it in 2018. It's being brought up again now. It may be brought up again in the future. So I guess if you were elected, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it almost certainly will be brought up again in the future. But I think you have two different issues. I think you have a monument and you have a flag. The monument, I believe, was built around 1904 to honor those who died during the Civil War. It was placed in the county seat when we were back in Ritchie Valley. And then when the county seat moved to Defuniax, it was moved to Defuniax to the courthouse. The flag was put there, I think it was in 1964, back when there was a lot of racial tensions in the country. I believe that the citizens voted 2 years ago to keep that flag there. However, that vote was non-binding, and I think that non-binding vote opens the door to start discussions again at some point in the future. I think one of the big problems that I have, and that a lot of people have, is it always seems to come up when tensions are high and emotions are high, which really makes it impossible for two sides to sit down and have a civil conversation. I think we need to get past the tough times that we're in, get to a point in time where the nation and the community is calmed down, where you can actually get together across the table from each other and sit down and talk. And I think if you have that discussion when people are more reasonable and emotions aren't on edge, I think you have a much better opportunity to solve the problem. If you try to do it when tensions are high and everybody's wanting to fight about everything, I think you have zero opportunity to solve a problem in this current environment. But I think down the road, when we calm things down and people are thinking more rationally, that civil conversation can actually develop a very good solution. That's a conversation I look forward to having. It's as when I was association president in San Antonio, I mean, we were lucky that we didn't have a lot of racial tension in San Antonio back then. When I got elected, I started meeting monthly with the president of the NAACP there in town, and had a great dialogue. I mean, we didn't have any problems. I mean, when something happened, I'd call them or they'd call me. We'd talk about it, and I mean, there was an Al Sharpton, just that type of person in the community, someone who wanted to be of that stature, who tried to stir things up every time there was an officer-involved shooting. We didn't have any shootings back then that were questionable. They were all legitimate officer-involved shootings where the officer had no choice but to use deadly force. And that was communicated to the community well, and it prevented those type of problems. So I'm very comfortable in having that discussion. I look forward to that discussion because I think people need to understand each other's feelings, why they feel the way they do. And I think if you do that in an atmosphere where people are reasonable, you can come up with a reasonable solution.
Okay. And another issue that is being discussed tonight, I think, what are your thoughts on a mandatory mask mandate in Walton County? Because I mean, experts say that this pandemic could go on for a year or 4 years. So yeah, I guess what are your thoughts on that?
We're missing the vote on that right now at the county commission meeting. I was watching that before I called you. That's kind of why I was rushing at the end to get on. There was no motion on the table to do anything, but they'd given the report, and the attorney had talked about what her findings were as far as the Leon County ordinance. I am not in favor of mandatory mask ordinance at all. I am in favor of the county issuing guidance and making recommendations. They can be a strong recommendation to follow the CDC rules or what the CDC recommends. Let individuals make that decision. If a business wants to make that decision to only serve people who wear a mask, that's that business's decision to make. I don't believe that it's government's role to tell a citizen what they have to do in their everyday lives when it comes to something like wearing a mask. I think that's an individual decision. Okay.
Well, I think that's all I have. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, this has been a strange campaign season. There's not been really the opportunity to get out and to shake hands and to meet people and to have the community forums that you normally get to have. But everybody's dealing with the same issue. So I've enjoyed it. I mean, I would like for it to be, it would have been nice if it had been more traditional, where you can have those face-to-face meetings and discussions and shake people's hands and kiss babies and all those kind of good things. But like I said, I'm looking forward to August the 18th. I think it's going to be a good day for the county, and I think we have a lot to look forward to.
Mr. Stewart, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, ma'am. You have a great day.
You too. Have a good day.